Frankly, it's kind of hard for me to already believe that we're almost halfway through the year. It felt like Christmas was just yesterday, but it turns out like a couple weeks ago we were celebrating Easter. And I'll be honest, I sort of forgot how many handhelds have already come out this year, but we also have seen some massive changes in the industry, leading to some of these devices being really hard to come by these days, especially after things like the tariff situation and overall just shipping between China and America being not exactly what it used to be last year, making getting some of these handhelds a lot harder. So this time around for my list, I decided to change it up and focus on handhelds that are more widely available on websites like Amazon and other third-party sellers that have stock reliably, but that might not apply to every handheld I talk about, and I will say that when talking about certain handhelds. We're also doing another thing a little bit differently. Each category is going to have two handhelds, one DMG, one standard landscape handheld, because I know some people really like the DMG style, and in my opinion, it's not my favorite, but there are some that really do stand out as amazing handhelds, so I figured it's good to showcase both form factors, except once we get to the later part of the list, when options like that either don't make a huge amount of sense in my opinion, or there just really isn't a good one in that category at that price point. So let's just jump right into it with the first section we're going to be talking about. It's the sub $100 price point. This is a personal favorite category of mine. I spent a lot of time reviewing handhelds in this category in particular, primarily because it's the most interesting and full of competition. And starting off with the DMG style, I think the Miyoo Mini V4/Plus, whichever one you find on Amazon, is honestly one of my favorite handhelds in this category for DMG handhelds. Sure, there's things like the GKD and a bunch of handhelds from Emulation, but they're either in short supply or a little overpriced. The main problem with Emulation is that they're straight up not shipping from any of their Chinese retailers or anything like that to America anymore, making it really hard to get your hands on some of these things. They do have some US warehouses still, but stock is very limited, so anything like the 35XX or any of their other derivatives aren't necessarily something I would recommend at this point. But the Miyoo Mini is still largely unaffected by this and has been generally available for quite some time, anywhere between $50 to $70-ish, depending on the version you want, capacities, and whatever other fixins you want with it. This device runs on a custom OS sometimes. I personally love running Onion OS on it. Mine came with it from the factory, which was really nice and has allowed you to create so many different custom themes and just really make the device your own, and is capable of some pretty decent performance, but isn't necessarily comfortable to play the higher end of systems that it's designed can realistically do. Things like N64, PS1, and Dreamcast are all things this device is capable of playing, while not necessarily being exactly comfortable to do so. It's clearly very much designed for all your favorite 2D and just 8 and 16-bit titles. And for that, this device is spectacular. My pick for a landscape handheld is the Trim UI Smart Pro. I really like the Smart Pro, purely because its analog sticks, being PS Vita analog sticks, kind of just touched a special place in my heart because I love my Vita so much, and we don't really see that often. I always really liked the analog sticks on the Vita, and seeing them implemented on another device actually makes me really happy. And the screen on it is fairly decent. The pre-installed operating system, which is Linux-based, isn't terrible, and it's at least more benign than some of the other Linux-based operating systems you have experienced in the past. You can find this device from anywhere between $70 to $90 on the upper end of this range. It's capable of playing pretty much all the same systems, including PSP games, which frankly do run fairly well, but you do not have access to the full library of PSP games. But the games that do run well in this, like Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, a personal favorite of mine, runs fairly well, and it's pretty much playing it on an original PSP in terms of how well it runs, which, if I'm going to be honest, is good enough for me. It also maxes out at PSP, N64, and Dreamcast games, and it runs them all fairly well. And at around that $60 to $80 price point, it's pretty solid of a value. I would highly recommend anybody picking this one up off of Amazon if you're interested. The next category we're going to be talking about is the sub $200 category. One of my favorite categories, because competition here means being able to play games like from the N64 at perfect quality, and games from the GameCube and PS2 also at really nice qualities, really making the overall experience significantly better than what it used to be even just a couple of years ago. And for my choice for this device, at least for the DMG one, is the Amberdic 406V. I know I mentioned that I wouldn't really try to do Amberdic handhelds as much, and on top of that, having it choose to be more available on these handhelds also isn't something that the 406V is, but the 406V is just downright one of my favorite DMG style handhelds. From its ergonomics to its level of performance with the T820 chipset, capable of running pretty much any game you could possibly want, excluding even potentially some Switch games, but it's not really designed for that, obviously, and it is more capable to running Nintendo Switch games, which were indie titles, but most of those are already natively on Android, which is the operating system on this device. So if you were going to go down that route, I would just recommend buying the title off of Android and not emulating it, because these are indie studios. Overall, it's honestly one of my favorite ways to play games from the GameCube and PS2 generation, having a screen perfect aspect ratio for those systems. I would highly recommend anybody interested in a DMG style handheld to choose this one, because in my opinion, it's the best one out there, from pricing at around $130 to $160 off of Amberdic's website to close to that $200 price point on Amazon, which is unfortunate considering that is quite the markup compared to buying it first party, which unfortunately you really can't due to Amberdic's whole shutting down all of their Chinese shipping facilities to America. For the landscape handheld, I chose the Retroid Pocket 4/4 Pro. The performance difference between the two, while being noticeable, isn't significant enough for depending on what games you're trying to play, especially if you are pretty much know for a fact you're not going to really touch higher end emulation such as Nintendo Switch and light PS3 emulation apparently. I really wouldn't buy it for those purposes, but you could really much get completely away with getting the base model for non-pro and have a fantastic experience with all of your GameCube and PS2 titles in a significantly more portable form factor. And I've always loved the design of this. Feels like a Nintendo Switch Lite, and it consistently has been one of my favorite designs. I've talked about it a whole bunch when comparing it against the Retroid Pocket 5. And for $140 for the non-pro and just about $180 for the pro model, I think you're pretty much good going in either direction with this. If you don't really care about having that extra performance for higher resolution GameCube and PS2, you can pretty much get away with getting the base model, save yourself that $40 and put that in your pocket for something else, and have still a really good experience and have zero complaints. For our sub $300 category, now this is where you're buying a nice premium handheld. You're still not dropping big bucks, but you are serious and you care about performance and design. One of the newest devices to come out this year is the Emberdic RG557. And once again, I am fully aware that this device is going to be pretty much unobtainium here in America, but it should be available on Amazon in the coming weeks. And once you were able to get your hands on one of those, this device is frankly going to be fantastic. At an MSRP of $250, I think this device is going to be honestly fantastic for the money. It has a brand new Dimensity chipset, the 8300, putting it in close competition with the Retroid Pocket 5 at a very similar price point. I would have put the Retroid Pocket 5 on here, but I really love the ergonomics of the 557 because it's just the same thing as the 556, same screen, just more performance. The ergonomics on that was fantastic, and I love the design. The transparent purple color coming back is, for me, a godsend because it is my favorite color. It has Hall effect triggers and analog sticks, not shoulder buttons, but I don't think that's really that necessary. I've seen some handhelds do it. It feels no different from normal bumpers, and I've never had a bumper die on me on a controller anyways. It is really good to see the competition in this price bracket really starting to heat up, especially with the introduction of a new handheld from Retroid, which is taking the spot of DMG handheld, because it's not going to be a DMG style handheld. The Retroid Pocket Flip 2 is an amazing return to form and overall just better experience in compared to the original Flip. The original Flip felt really cheap and shiny, plasticky. The new one feels so much better has the same level of power as the normal Vive and 5 Mini. It uses the Snapdragon 865, a very decent processor capable of some fairly decent performance, enabling you to play games all the way up until the Nintendo Switch generation. And once the emulator gets more efficient and overall just more optimized, you should be able to play PS3 games once that gets overall better on Android. As it currently stands, that can only be played on the highest end devices. The massive selling point for this device is personally for me the flip form factor, but being almost $30 cheaper than the 557 while still being in direct competition in terms of performance. Sometimes the 8300 takes the battle and sometimes the 865 takes the crown. It's really a bit of a toss-up at the moment once we get more definitive benchmarks. But at $230 for the 865 model and an even $200 for the Dimensity 1100 model, which we've established, still performs very good. This is a very compelling device with, in my opinion, one of the best designs and form factors you could possibly have for a portable emulation handheld. The very last section we're going to be talking about is the high end. This is where you're spending pretty much all the money on a handheld, and means it exceeds $300. I could have put a few different handhelds here, but in my opinion, buying a DMG style handheld at this category simply doesn't make a huge amount of sense. They're not comfortable for 3D titles long term. They're not really designed to play those systems. And if you're spending $400 or $500 on a handheld of that style, you're just getting a ton of extra performance you really don't need. Even if you're playing native Android titles, which I don't see why you would on a DMG style handheld, there are significantly better alternatives from companies like Retroid with the Retroid Classic and from Airbranic with the 406V. So that left me with what is the pinnacle landscape handheld that is the highest end handheld I could think of. And for me personally, it's the Odin 2 Portal. At about $330 MSRP, this device has an OLED screen clocking in about 8 inches. It is high refresh rate at 120 Hz. Gives you solid performance with the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 2, enabling you to emulate pretty much everything, including Windows emulation and PS3 emulation, in almost flawless Nintendo Switch emulation, but it is a little bit more janky because of how really Nintendo has been going hard on those Nintendo Switch emulators. And honestly, there are some other options that are more powerful or more expensive and overall just more premium design-wise, but for me, the pinnacle is the Odin 2. It is by far, at least in my opinion, the best looking handheld on the market, and there are some competitive handhelds from the places like Aya with their Aya Neo Evo and their Pocket DMG and a few other Android-based handhelds, but those are either way too expensive for no good reason, has features that you realistically are never going to use, or I just don't like it. Some might say I'm biased against Ein, and I would have to tell you, yeah, I haven't been convinced that any of their devices are worth it because they're constantly so expensive. I would love to hear what you guys think though. Are any of these handhelds interesting to you guys? Are any of you convinced to buy any of them? I would love to hear what you guys think down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media coverage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.